HOA called code enforcement on my treehouse, but it was a community project for kids. The knock on my door was angry. Not the kind you get from a friendly neighbor borrowing sugar. This was a demand, a warning. I swung it open to see Mr. Grayson, HOA president, standing there like he owned the damn street. Behind him, two board members flanked his sides like a couple of lapdogs. And in his hand, a stack of papers, thick, official, and reeking of bureaucracy. "Read it," he snapped, thrusting them toward me. I didn't move. "What's this?" His face was already flushed red, veins bulging in his neck. He was pissed. "You know exactly what this is. Don't play dumb with me." He took a step forward, toe-to-toe now. "Do you think you can just do whatever the hell you want in my neighborhood?" I held his stare, refusing to flinch. "His neighborhood? Oh, hell no." I snatched the papers from his hand, eyes skimming the first page. Code violation. Immediate removal required. Fines accruing daily. For the treehouse. For our treehouse. I let out a slow breath. I knew this was coming, but I hadn't expected him to be this bold, this aggressive, this desperate to put me in my place. "Grayson, the treehouse is safe, legal, and built with community approval." "Bullshit," he barked. "You didn't get HOA approval, and that means it's illegal." I folded my arms. "Illegal? You're acting like I built a meth lab in my backyard. It's a damn treehouse for the kids, Grayson." He scoffed, shaking his head like he couldn't believe my audacity. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about some rickety pile of wood up in a tree." He jabbed a finger at me. "This is about you not following the rules. I run this HOA. If I let you get away with this, it'll be anarchy. Next thing you know, people will be parking RVs in their driveways, painting their houses neon green, putting up giant tacky-yard gnomes." "Oh no, not the gnomes," I deadpanned. His face darkened. "Listen, you little shit." One of the board members, Karen something, gasped. "Grayson, maybe we should." "Shut it, Karen," he snapped. I leaned against the doorframe, calm on the outside, but my blood was boiling inside. I had zero patience for HOA dictators throwing their weight around. "You're tough with your little rule book." "Huh," I said. "Tell me, does your HOA handbook mention that your backyard gazebo was never approved? Or that your buddy on the board has an unregistered shed?" His eye twitched. I had him. "You think you're smart?" He sneered. "Fine. You want to play games. Let's play." He leaned in so close I could smell the cheap cologne and coffee on his breath. "You've got 7 days to tear that shit down," he hissed. "Or I'll make your life a living hell." And with that, he turned and stormed off. Karen gave me an apologetic look before scurrying after him. I exhaled slowly, gripping the violation notice in my hands. 7 days? "Oh, Grayson." I smiled. "You have no idea who you're fucking with. 7 days. 7 goddamn days." Grayson thought he could bully me into submission. Not a chance. I didn't back down from fights. I played to win. By the next morning, word had spread. Neighbors whispered as I walked down the street. Some avoided eye contact. Others, the silent supporters, gave me tight nods, quiet acknowledgments that said, "We see you. We know what he's doing." Then came the first petty move. A HOA-issued noise complaint landed in my mailbox. The claim. Children's excessive shouting. Yeah, kids. Laughing. Playing Joy-OE was illegal now. I crumpled the paper in my fist. "Nice try, Grayson." But it didn't stop there. By noon, 2 more letters arrived. 1, lawn maintenance warning. Because my grass was overgrown, it wasn't. 2, trash bin violation. Because I had improperly stored my cans. Also bullshit. This was systematic harassment. Pressure tactics. And I wasn't playing defense. I was going on the attack. I fired off an email to the HOA board, cease Angie, every resident in the community. And I had just pulled the pin. By day 3, the HOA's petty war had escalated. An official city code inspector showed up at my property, sent by Grayson. He was a stocky guy in a button-down, clipboard in hand, already annoyed before even stepping out of his truck. "HOA filed a complaint," he said, flipping through his notes. "Unsafe structure. No permits." I gestured to the treehouse. "Want to take a look?" We walked the perimeter as he snapped photos. I kept my arms crossed, waiting. Finally, he sighed. "This is fine," he muttered. "You followed the ode. Whoever sent this, they're just trying to mess with you." "Exactly." I smirked. "Mind putting that in writing?" He scribbled something onto his clipboard. "I'll file an official report. But heads up, your HOA president? He's gunning for you. Let him." That night, more letters showed up. A $250 fine for a non-compliant structure. A threat of further penalties if I didn't begin immediate removal. They were turning the screws. But they had no idea I was already one step ahead. I spent the next 2 days digging deep. If they wanted a war, I was building my arsenal. First stop, County Permit Office. I requested every HOA construction approval for the last 5 years. Took some charm and some patience. But when the clerk handed over the files, oh, this was good. And Grayson, his gazebo, his shed, and even his damn fence violated multiple HOA rules. The best part, I had it in writing. Then came the financials. A few curious neighbors, ones who weren't exactly Team HOA, tipped me off. If I could prove misuse of funds, I wouldn't just win this battle. I'd bury him. By the time the HOA hearing date arrived, they were desperate. The morning of the meeting, a final notice appeared on my door. They thought I was scared. I was ready. I walked into the meeting with a folder full of evidence. Grayson sat at the head of the table, smug, fingers steepled. "We'll start with the first order of business." I cut him off. "No, let's start with this." I slammed the folder onto the table. Eyes widened. Selective enforcement. Unauthorized expenditures. HOA violations committed by board members. Silence. Should I keep going? Grayson's face was a storm. He tried to regain control. "This meeting is about your violation." "No, Grayson. This meeting is about you." The room exploded. People were picking sides. And the silent majority? They weren't silent anymore. Why the hell are we paying higher dues if he's not following the same rules? Someone shouted. Karen, the board member who had flinched at Grayson's insults, stood up. "I want a vote of no confidence." Grayson's smugness cracked. I leaned forward. "You thought you could bully me. But the real problem, Grayson?" I smirked. "You got greedy. And you got sloppy. Desperation makes men stupid." Grayson snapped. He pointed at me, face red, spit flying. "This is a goddamn witch hunt." Oh, wrong move. Because when a man panics, he shows his hand. "Do you want to talk about misuse of funds?" "Fine." He shoved back his chair. "We used HOA money to hire private security last year, too." He stopped mid-sentence. "Too late." Gasps filled the room. "Excuse me?" Karen said, her voice dangerously calm. "Did you use our HOA funds for personal security?" His mouth opened, closed. Dead silence. I smiled. "So, about my treehouse?" Grayson sat back down. He was done. Grayson wasn't just pissed. He was bleeding out in front of the entire HOA. His own words had sealed his fate. The second he admitted misusing HOA funds, the whispers turned into full-on shouts. "We pay for this neighborhood, and you're using our money for what? Is this why the HOA fees keep going up? We should have investigated this years ago." Grayson's face twisted in fury. But he wasn't done fighting. "I'm still HOA president," he barked, slamming his fist on the table. "And this meeting is still about you breaking the rules." The room erupted. "You're joking, right?" One guy yelled. Karen, the only board member with a spine, folded her arms. "I don't think you're in a position to enforce anything, Grayson." But Grayson, he still thought he had power. He turned back to me, eyes wild, clinging to the only thing he had left, his delusion. "The treehouse is still a violation. The order stands. If it's not gone in 24 hours, I'll have it removed myself." The threat hung in the air. My fingers clenched. "Oh, you want to play dirty, Grayson?" I stepped forward. "Try it. See what happens." That meeting sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. By the next morning, there were two sides. One, the ones who had always hated Grayson. Now, they had an excuse to finally turn on him. Two, the ones who feared change. The ones who clung to the idea that Grayson kept the neighborhood safe from chaos. And smack in the middle, the silent majority. Watching. Waiting. I didn't have to wait long for the next move. That afternoon, a construction crew showed up. to tear down the treehouse. I ran outside. Grayson stood there, arms crossed, watching like a king overseeing an execution. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded. "You had your chance," he sneered. "Now we're handling it." I turned to the crew. "You touch it, and I'll sue you for property damage. This is MY land." The workers hesitated. Because here's the thing. Grayson had no legal authority to order this. One of the guys scratched his head. We're just following the work order." I pulled out my phone. "Tell your boss to expect a lawsuit." The foreman muttered something under his breath, then called off the crew. Grayson lost it. "You don't get to win, you little shit. This isn't over." I stared him down. "Oh, Grayson." My smile was ice cold. "It already is." That night, I got a knock on the door. Not a friendly knock. A cop knocks. I opened the door to find 2 uniformed officers. The taller one cleared his throat. "We got a call about an illegal structure violating neighborhood ordinances." My jaw clenched. Of course. Grayson had called the police. I forced a polite smile. "This is a civil matter, not a criminal one. This is a treehouse on my property, not a meth lab." The second officer looked bored. "Sir, are you refusing to comply with the HOA's request?" I crossed my arms. "I'm refusing to comply with an illegitimate order issued by a man who is currently under investigation for misusing HOA funds." That got their attention. The first cop shifted uncomfortably. "Look, we're just here because we got a complaint." "Right," I said. "And who filed that complaint?" Neither of them answered. Didn't have to. I turned my phone toward them, hitting play on a recording. Grayson's voice crackled through the speaker. "We used HOA money to hire private security last year too." The officers exchanged looks. "Right," one muttered. "We're gonna let you sort this out with your HOA." They left. I shut the door. And then I laughed. Grayson was out of ammo. But I was just getting started. The next HOA meeting wasn't just a meeting. It was a damn event. Neighbors showed up in droves. The air was thick with tension. The folding chairs set up in the clubhouse weren't enough. People stood along the walls, whispering, waiting. At the front of the room, Grayson sat like a king on a crumbling throne, trying to look composed, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed him. He knew this was his last stand. Karen, the only board member with a shred of integrity, called the meeting to order. But before she could finish her sentence, I stood up. "Before we begin, let's address the elephant in the room," I said, voice cutting through the murmurs. "We all know why we're here." Grayson scoffed. "You don't run these meetings, you arrogant little." "I don't need to," I interrupted. "The facts do." I stepped forward, slow, deliberate, like a fighter circling their opponent. Then I dropped the first bomb. I pulled out the city inspector's report. According to the city, the treehouse? Completely legal. No code violations. No safety risks. Which means, I turned to the crowd, voice booming. This entire fight was personal. Grayson's jaw tightened. He tried to speak, but I cut him off again. Bomb 2. I held up the HOA's financial records. Under Grayson's leadership, HOA fees have increased 3 times. And yet, according to these numbers, funds were redirected to a security initiative. I let that hang. Gasps rippled through the room. I stalked forward, slamming the folder on the table in front of him. "Tell me, Grayson, why does our HOA need a security initiative?" His face turned ghost white. Now came the final blow. I pulled out my phone. Hit play. Grayson's voice filled the room. "We used HOA money to hire private security last year too." Silence. Then, chaos. Neighbors erupted. "What the hell? You used our money for what?" "You absolute piece of shit." Karen stood. "Grayson, is this true?" Grayson snapped. "So what if it is?" He barked, slamming his hands on the table. "Do you think you're all so damn special? Do you think you can just do whatever you want? This community needs order." The room lost it. He turned to the board, pleading now. "You know I've always done what's best for this neighborhood. You know this place will fall apart without me." Karen shook her head. "Enough, Grayson. The final nail in the coffin. I'd like to motion for a vote of no confidence." The vote? Unanimous. Grayson? Done. The board moved so fast that it was almost comical. But the best part? The board filed an official complaint with the city. Legal trouble was brewing for Grayson. He stormed toward the door, fuming. "You think you've won?" He spat, eyes wild. "You have no idea what you've started." I leaned in, voice low. "Lethal." "Oh, Grayson," I said, smiling. "I know exactly what I started." He slammed the door on his way out. And just like that, the king was dethroned. Grayson was gone. The moment he stormed out of that meeting, the whole neighborhood felt different. The tension snapped. The fear evaporated. People laughed as they talked and whispered about everything they had been too afraid to say for years. But for me, this wasn't over, because Grayson wasn't just some power-hungry HOA dictator. He was a liability, and liabilities always try to strike back. I knew that when he lost, he wouldn't go quietly, and I was right. 3 days later, I got a letter from his lawyer. Cease. Defamation. Harassment. Slander. Oh, he was trying. I showed it to my attorney, a shark of a woman named Michelle. She read it, then burst out laughing. "This is garbage," she said, tossing it on her desk. "He's bluffing. He has nothing." I leaned back. "So what do we do?" She grinned. "We file first." That afternoon, we submitted a formal complaint to the city. Within a week, the city launched a full audit. Grayson, he wasn't just losing his HOA title. He was about to lose everything. After the storm, the neighborhood went through a transformation. The new HOA board? Transparent. Fair. Accountable. Karen stepped up as interim president, and for the first time, people felt heard. And the Treehouse. It stayed. The board voted to protect it. It was officially recognized as a community structure, with safety guidelines in place to keep it up for years to come. One afternoon, as I sat on my porch watching the kids play, one of my quieter neighbors, Mr. Alvarez, wandered over. He hesitated, then said, "I wanted to thank you." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" He sighed. "For standing up when the rest of us were too scared to." I waved him off. "You weren't scared. You were smart. You saw what Grayson did to people who questioned him." Mr. Alvarez nodded. "Yeah, but we should have done something sooner." I glanced at the treehouse. "Well, you're doing something now." A pause. Then he smiled. "We all owe you a beer." Months passed. The audit wrecked what was left of Grayson's reputation. The city's decision? Fines, restitution, and a permanent HOA ban. Grayson? He moved, sold his house, packed his bags, and disappeared like a bitter memory. But the neighborhood? It flourished. One day, I found a small plaque nailed to the treehouse. It read, "In honor of those who stood up when it mattered." I ran my fingers over the engraving, a slow smile creeping across my face. This wasn't just a treehouse. This was a monument to community, to defiance, to winning. And damn, it felt good to win.